Assalamualaikum and good morning to Dr. Nurhani. First of all, we would like to introduce ourselves. My name is Nurhani binti Ali Hassan. Our group will be discussing about inflation in Lebanon. First of all, I'm going to explain about the definition of inflation. In economics, inflation or less often, value expansion can be defined as a general rise in the value level in an economy throughout some period of time, resulting in a sustained drop in the purchasing power of money. Inflation can be viewed as a positive thing when it helps boost consumer demand and consumption, stimulating economic growth. We are moving on to the background of Lebanon. Lebanon is a nation situated on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea, and it comprises of a limited segment of an area and is one of the world's most modern sovereign states. The capital of Lebanon is Beirut. Lebanon shares a large number of social qualities of the Arab world, yet it has credited spread it from a considerable lots of its Arab neighbors. Its tough, uneven territory have served since the beginning as a shelter for assorted street and ethnic gathering and for political protesters. Lebanon is one of the most thickly populated nations in the Mediterranean zone and has a high pace of education. Despite its beautiful characteristic assets, Lebanon since quite a while ago figured out how to feed it a bustling business and social community for the Middle East. Lebanon is limited towards the north and east by Syria, toward the south by Palestine, and toward the west by the Mediterranean Sea. Next, population of Lebanon. Lebanon 2022 population is estimated to 5,445 people at mid-year according to United Nations data. Lebanon population is equivalent to 0.09% of the total world population. Lebanon ranked number 109 in the list of countries and dependencies by population. The current population of Lebanon is 6,747,920 as of Wednesday, January 18, 2023, based on Worldometer elaboration of the latest United Nations data. Thank you.
Now let us move on Lebanon's background of inflation. Lebanon's inflation rate was 20% month-on-month in June 2020. Across other words, prices in the country were 20% higher on average than a month earlier. In June 2019, they had nearly doubled compared to the previous year. Lebanon is on its path to hyperinflation, which occurs when prices of products and services fluctuate daily and climb by more than 50% in a month. Hyperinflation is most usually associated with nations such as Venezuela and Zimbabwe, which have had annual inflation rates of 15,000% and 319% respectively this year. Lebanon is expected to join their ranks. Food inflation increased by 108.9% in the first half of 2020. Lebanon is in the grip of an impending collapse. Unsustainable economic policies, combined with an overvalued currency pegged to the US dollar, have resulted in persistent deficits. As a result, the public debt in 2020 will be more than 184% of GDP, the third highest ratio in the world. The banking and financial crisis was precipitated by a series of policy mistakes, beginning with the unjustified closure of banks in October 2019, supposedly in response to political protests against government inefficiency and corruption. Banks have never been shuttered or payments suspended previously, whether during Lebanon's civil war, which is 1975 until 1990, Israeli invasions, or other political turmoil. The bank closures resulted in an instant loss of trust in the financial sector as a whole. They were accompanied by informal limits on foreign currency transactions, foreign exchange license, deposit freezing, and other payment limitations to preserve Lebanon's central bank's decreasing reserves. All of this resulted in a strong liquidity and credit squeeze. as well as the formation of a multi-currency system, leading in a further loss of trust in the monetary system and the Lebanese pound. Multiple exchange rates are very dangerous. They cause market inefficiencies, stimulate rent-seeking, which the accumulation of riches without generating actual value, and open up new avenues for cronyism and corruption. The outcome has been a significant 20% decrease in economic activity, consumption, and investment, as well as an increase in bankruptcies. Lebanon is suffering fast-growing unemployment, over 35% of the population, and poverty rates that approach 50% of the population. With government revenues diminishing, the Lebanese Central Bank is progressively financing expanding budget deficits, resulting in escalating inflation.
The inflation rate in Lebanon from 2018 is at 4.55%, and it goes down to 2.9% in the year 2019. And in the year 2020, it goes up to 88.18%. Meanwhile, in the year 2021, it goes up at 110.24%.
Political corruption that has been institutionalized in Lebanon for many years has had a negative impact on the country's economy. The Lebanon Central Bank was exposed to a Ponzi scheme in late 2019 to cover its debts. The bank borrowed money at rates above market rate. During this same time, Lebanese residents were getting more and more dissatisfied with their government. They experienced limited electricity and internet connection, limited access to clean water, and insufficient medical care. The Prime Minister tried to charge WhatsApp calls in order to raise money as the populace started to protest the economic chaos his government was causing. The situation got worse due to increased economic strains brought on the COVID-19 related quarantines and shutdowns at the beginning of 2020, when an explosion struck Beirut, a major Lebanese city, in August 2020, killing at least 200 people and injuring 5,000 more. Frustration reached a breaking point. The Prime Minister and his government resigned as a result, ushering in political and economic revolution. Since then, attempts to process aid and lower inflation have been more challenging because the Lebanese government has not yet begun to rebuild. However, the influx of US dollars started to decline after 2011. This happened when hostilities erupted in Syria, Lebanon's neighbor, prompting international investors to withdraw money from Lebanese banks out of concern for financial loss. As a result, Lebanon experienced its first decline in US dollar liquidity in 10 years. Dollar reserves in the years that followed were almost gone. Banks were forced to impose restriction on cash withdrawals in US dollars because they did not have enough money to meet demand. The Lebanese pound declined due to a lack of foreign investment, while the nation's debt increased. Next is impact of inflation on economy and society. Public debt default. On March 9, 2020, Lebanon was supposed to pay back 1.2 billion Eurobond with maturities in April and June following. The total debt was 170% of GDP. This was significantly more than the nation could afford, which prompted Prime Minister Hassan Diab to declare that he would not pay the Eurobond debt. Lack of foreign currency hinders the country's capacity to pay for imports, including essential products like wheat and oil. Local companies suffered as well since banks were unable to continue giving them access to short-term loans. 785 restaurants and cafes shuttered as a result of the crisis, which resulted in the loss of 25,000 employment. For medical shortage, the lack of foreign cash in the nation makes it difficult for Lebanese pharmaceutical companies to manufacture or import life-saving drugs. In July 2021, the Lebanese government lifted subsidies on the majority of life-saving medications to tackle this shortfall. The entire Lebanese population is impacted by this situation, but those with little or no incomes suffer the most because medicines has become a luxury that most people cannot afford. Moving on to fuel scarcity as a cost of employment. As a result of the economic crisis, both the public and private sectors are unable to import gasoline and other necessary fuels. The Lebanese government increased gasoline prices by 66% in August 2021 to resolve this critical gasoline shortage in the nation. As a result, many low-wage independent contractors like taxi and bus drivers were unable to continue working. The major breadwinners of low-income families have recently lost their jobs, further depressing the working class in Lebanon. One is diet is deteriorating. The most vulnerable citizens of Lebanon still don't have meat on their dinner tables. The cost of meat is rising as the nation's currency continues to decline in value, according to a World Bank analysis. Fresh and frozen cow meat prices in Lebanon soared by 110% at year's conclusion. In addition, during the past few months, chicken prices have increased by 68.4%. Malnutrition creates a concern to Lebanon's poor and hungry population because there are no other readily accessible, reasonably priced sources of protein. Additionally, according to data collected by UNICEF in April 2021, 3 in 10 families had at least one child who was missing meals.
As part of Lebanon's negotiations with the International Monetary Fund (IMF) to resolve the situation, Prime Minister Hassan Diab prepared a financial recovery plan that compromises fiscal, banking, and structural reforms. However, there has been no attempt to add fiscal or monetary reform. So, in effect, Prime Minister Diab's government and Riyad Salameh, the head of the central bank, they deliberately implemented a policy of imposing an inflation tax and illegal larification. Larification brings a meaning of a forced conversion of foreign currency deposits into Lebanese pounds in order to achieve internal real deflation. So what are their main objectives? First of all, they impose a domestic solution and exclude an IMF's program and associated reforms. This brings to the inflation tax and larification reduce real income along with financial wealth, sorry. So that leads to a sharp reduction in real income, and the decline of the pound are leading to a massive contraction of imports. This shows that Lebanon is experiencing a failed exchange rate and incompetent monetary and government policies. So, regardless of the Lebanon's failed attempt on overcoming its inflation, our group discovered 4 policy measures that can be carried out to rescue Lebanon's inflation state. So, the first policy measures is Capital Control Act should be passed immediately to replace informal controls that took place since October 2019. This way, Lebanese Central Bank is able to stem the continuing outflow of capital and stabilize the exchange rate. And the second policy measure is fiscal reform. Lebanon should start by reforming the power sector and raise the prices of subsidized commodities and services such as fuel and electricity. This would then prevent fuel smuggle and other goods sanctions laden Syria, which drains Lebanon's reserves. The third policy measure is unify exchange rates and move to a flexible exchange rate regime. The failed exchange rate regime has contributed to our current account deficits, which hurt export-oriented sectors and forced the central bank to maintain high interest rates, which leads to causing a crowding out of the private sector. And fourth would be Lebanon should be exhilarating negotiations with the IMF and agree to a program that sets wide-ranging conditions on policy reform.
As a conclusion, Lebanon is now experiencing a serious economic and financial problem. The country's financial and monetary unrest had an impact on exchange rate and contributed to the currency crisis there. In 2020, the economic crisis in Lebanon was worsened by the explosion in the Beirut port and the coronavirus outbreak. The war is one of the reasons Lebanon is on the verge of social upheaval, extreme poverty, growing inflation, and hyperinflation, as well as a sharp decline in its currency value. A rescue strategy of the Lebanese economy is being developed along with the help of International Monetary Fund (IMF). It is recommended that there are at least 3 requirements must be made for the Lebanon to be rebuilt and somewhat restored to its pre-war condition. The first one is a long-term political agreement that guarantees a stable environment for the administration of justice and the protection of property rights and personal safety. The second one is a substantial foreign assistance and investment program to support domestic saving and meet the needs of domestic investment. Lastly, there should be a significant fiscal reform that limits the rise of government expenditure and changes the taxation structure.